Okay, so welcome to Black Hippie Lounge. I'm your host Chanel, and today we have a guest. His name is Yanley, and he's a listener who has expressed interest to want to be on the podcast, and so I'm definitely grateful to have him on. We'll be discussing love and relationships. So, Yanley, welcome to the Black Hippie Lounge.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming on. So I will start off by asking you, how did you hear about Black Hippie Lounge podcast and what made you want to reach out and be a guest?
So the way I heard about the Black Hippie Lounge podcast, I was following you, Chanel, just randomly following, liking regular pictures. And then one time, actually a couple of times, you posted in your story that you had a podcast, the Black Hippie Lounge. And I just kept, taking screenshots like, hey, I'll go back to this eventually because I was compiling a list of podcasts I could potentially listen to in the future. And then one day I was just on the way to the market and I was like, you know what? Let me click into this real quick. And I listened, the first one I ever listened to was Let Them Go. I believe that was back in January. Because I remember you were talking about more so kind of New Year's resolutions and certain things like that. So I don't know, and the fact that the podcast wasn't like 3-4 hours, because before that I was listening to like the Joe Budden podcast, and it's like I love the content. It's just like super long, so I cannot just sit there and get into it. But the fact that yours are 30 minutes, you get right to it. It feels like a warm environment. I'm like, you know what? Let me tell a couple other people about this, and eventually I wanted to jump on.
Thank you. So can you tell listeners a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Yanley. I was raised in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I spent the most of my life. I went to school initially for healthcare, but realized I hate hospitals, so that switched kind of quickly. Because my family's from Haiti, never been, hope to go one day. But in Haitian culture, a lot of times it's like medical field or law, be a lawyer or engineer. If not, you're not doing anything with the family. At least in my family, they're kind of strict like that. So I went into nursing initially. Didn't want to do that, so I switched my major to health science because it was the quickest way to get my degree and get out of there. Afterward, I realized, let's try my hat in information technology. Realized, hey, great benefits, this is cool, but I'm bored behind this cubicle, get me out of here. So after that, I was just kind of like thinking around, like, what are some things that I really want to do? And I've always loved youth development. And that's what I do today. I've been doing it for about six or 7 years now. Just really passionate about giving back to my community. Little backstory behind that. I had a few friends who came up, similarly to myself in Cambridge. A lot of opportunities. We weren't all well off or like, in the middle class or upper class. We all come from first generation college homes, a lot of immigrant families. But the beautiful part about Cambridge is there's always resources and opportunities to better yourself. So as I got older, I found that some of my friends were just passing away due to, gun violence, gang violence, things of that nature. And I realized that, where was the miss? How can I impact my community differently so that doesn't happen? Because as a youth, I used to always look up to the guys who were older in my community who are doing, some of those things in the streets. And if it wasn't for a program called the Workforce Youth Program, that kind of like, I was kind of forced to do because my mom's like, either do this or I'm kicking you out. And it really just changed my perspective on things and kept me out the streets. So, and when I got older, I joined a program called Year Up in Boston, which really helped me just change my mentality and, make me just more easier to acclimate to like the more professional environment. So I'm like, you know what, how can I give some of these tools to the youth where I'm from? And that's what I'm trying to do today.
Nice. I love that. I love that you decided to give back and you appreciated the program that helped you. So, now you're helping other people. So it's definitely appreciated and it's needed, especially, myself, I came from working in youth development too. So it's definitely needed work and it's definitely appreciated. So we're going to talk about love and relationships, right? So what are your thoughts on dating today?
Oh, dating today. That's going to be an interesting topic. So I feel that, social media has kind of made dating a little bit more tricky than it's been in the past. Not only social media, but also like the pandemic and how that's kind of like changed the world as well.
Right.
I'm somebody who typically, you know, I wouldn't mind going, like when I was younger, I would just go to either a bar, a club, you know, maybe a get together, a gathering, an event. And that's how I would meet somebody new and go from there. But now, you know, ever since the pandemic and being, you know, isolating and social distance and things like that, and trying our best to stay safe and not catch COVID, it's been a lot of like online dating. So, which could be tricky and kind of a little unsafe in some cases. Right. Thankfully, in my experience, I haven't experienced any of those situations, but I've seen them not only in the news, but firsthand from friends. That hasn't always been the safest environment for them, because you never know who's on the other side of that keyboard, right? Or that cell phone. So when I'm dating, I make sure that, you know, and I've had some complication with this and have gotten like curved and ghosted because of this. I make sure that, you know, the person knows not everything about me, but as much as they need to know to feel safe when we finally do meet up, right? So there might be those cases where somebody wants to meet up like within the same couple of weeks of the initial DM or any of that stuff, but I'm like, let's take it easy, take our time, so that you can know that and I always use this line, so that you make sure that you know that I'm not I'm not going to kidnap you. I always say that because I need to make, and we laugh about it, which is always a great icebreaker when I'm talking to somebody online, but I'm real with it. I'm making sure that they know that they're getting a genuine guy who's not about to do anything like crazy to them, honestly. You know?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because I feel like when it comes to online dating, I've definitely heard that, you know, both sides. Some people who want to take it slow as far as meeting, and then other people who'd rather meet sooner than later to kind of, I guess, get it over with or figure out, you know, if that's the person that they want to keep talking to. So they have to do what works for you. But exactly. Yeah, so how do you navigate dating relationships as a man today?
Today, the way I do it a lot differently than when I used to. And I'll just be real with you, I did fall into the spectrum of quote unquote, you know, making like fuckboy type decisions and like not always taking the other person's feelings into consideration. Something that really changed me in like a real way was when my nephew was born. And when I actually got into this work of youth development, because I'll just use an example. I was mentoring one of these young ladies. She had to be nothing more than like 16 years old, right? And we were walking back from the facility, and you know, she said, "Hey, can I just walk with you so I could just like vent about what's going on?" It was pouring rain. Typically, I don't like to be in a setting that where there's not a lot of people around, especially when I'm a female student. But I was really walking to my car. It was outside in a public space. So I just said, you know, why not? And she was very distraught. And she was just telling me, like, why do guys treat me this way? In the rain, while she's pouring tears out of her eyes, and saying, why do guys not like me? Why they treat me this way? Why am I constantly being used? And I just thought to myself, like, oh my goodness, how much of a jerk I was in the past, right? That literally, and not only that, my nephew wanted to make sure he looks up to me, and I instilled all those values in him, because when I was younger, I used to look up to the older guys who were talking to many girls at one time, and all these girls were like after them, and they were, you know, the quote unquote the man, right? So as a young impressionable kid, I want to be that. And then once you get older, you realize, or down the line, you've hurt a lot of people for no reason, just to impress a bunch of like grown men who are doing the same thing that they were doing at like age 18 that they're doing at age like 42. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that mentality just really like changed my thinking. So the way I kind of navigate now is just to make sure that I'm communicating properly, because one of the biggest challenges in relationships is communication, especially even in the talking stage, right? So understanding like how the person on the other side like communicates. We'll get to this probably a little later, but like, you know, some of their love languages, for example. Do they like to, are they a morning person? Are they an evening person? Do they prefer to be woken up do they want that good morning text at 7 a.m.? Do they prefer the good night text? Do they prefer edible arrangements over flowers? Which is a big one, because I'm a big edible arrangements guy. Okay. I find that flowers die a little bit too quickly, but again, it's about me understanding my partner and the person on the other line. Like, okay, I might not want to get them flowers, but they want flowers, so get them flowers, right? Unless I have some like, something against, giving people flowers and things like that. So that's a couple of things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So on that topic, like, what are the struggles with dating today that you think exist?
Some of the struggles, I'd say, we'll go into social media in a minute, but I think like a lot of the gender norms is like probably the biggest issue, I think, now. And I was just to say, like, let's use chivalry, for example. A lot of things that were considered chivalrous, like back in, the 1920s, 30s, and things like that, are completely different now today. So that's why I feel that, some of those norms that certain people might have expectations towards might be causing some of the communication issues, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. I'll just use an example. How do you feel about your partner having you on the inside of the sidewalk compared to like on the outside?
I mean, I definitely like that. And I feel like most guys that I've, went on dates with or dated, it's just like kind of like an automatic thing that they do. But it's definitely something like I paid attention to. But I definitely prefer to be like inside. Yeah. I mean, definitely like, I feel like chivalry is definitely important. Especially if you've experienced dating someone who isn't chivalrous. It's like, it's key. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Like some of the issues that I have is when I'm dating someone who might have come from dating a few men who know nothing about dates or chivalry, and then they come to me and it's like, there's two things that might happen. One, they might love like, oh my goodness, I've never been on a date before. I've never experienced this before. Thank you so much. Or to the side, like, what the heck are you doing? I've gotten that when it comes to the walking on the side of the road thing. And then me having to kind of explain like the history behind that. Some women really appreciate it. Some are like, you know what? Let's just go out the window. I don't have time for that. Or they might even say like, this is weird. So that's one of the challenges with that. And with chivalry, as things change now and, women become more financially dependent on themselves and not having like really worried about the man as much like that. I feel like some of the norms have kind of been shifted a little bit. Like me personally, I'll always feel that if I invite you out on a date, like, hey, let's go on a date, I'm going to pay for that date, especially the first date. Mm-hmm. The second one, if I invite you again, because we're still in the talking stage, and we could talk about the whole distinctions between talking stage, dating stage, relationship stage. I feel like the generation has it all like shaky, like, but in certain stages, the guy, personally, I feel that if I'm the one asking someone to come out with me, then I feel a sense of obligation to like provide in that space. And if the woman says, hey, I'd like to take the tip, pay for the tip, I'm all right with that. Now, there is some men who might feel, what's the word I'm looking for? Demasculated in a sense if a woman's paying for him in any capacity. Me personally, life is short. If you want to pay for this, great. I got the next thing, right? I feel like one of the challenges has been the ongoing conversation about 50-50 and where the line is drawn. I'm somebody who's more like I like to say like 60-40 or whomever I'm with, however we're able to navigate that together, because I don't like to get too hung up on let's count who's doing what. Like, all right, great, I paid $50 for this dinner, make sure you pay $50 for this this lunch or something like that. You know what I mean? Just kind of tracking that. I feel like you should just kind of like go with the flow depending on the situation. I'm not married, so I can't really speak to that, how it works in like marriage. But for me, I feel like one of the challenges has definitely been just kind of like breaking down some of those social norms and not be so hung up on them. Because a lot of times I've heard like, hey, why aren't these guys providing like their grandfathers? And the rebuttal I always give there is like, and a lot of women might say, or guys might say like, well, women aren't behaving like their grandmothers anymore. And me personally, I don't want you to behave like my grandmother, but grandmothers, because in those times back then, it was more so like a lot of women had to kind of like just go. They might be in a terrible situation. Maybe their man cheat on them left and right, but they feel obligated to stay in that situation because they're financially dependent, or society might shun them for like wanting a divorce and things like that. Where me personally, some of those norms, I'm like, you know what, let's just throw those out the window. And I never really understood a lot of guys say, I want a woman who can cook and clean. I can clean myself. I could do better at cooking. So if my partner can like help me out and teach me how to cook and we kind of do that together, great. But I never really understood the whole like, wanting a woman to clean for you. I'm like, she's not my maid. We can clean each other's messes. Like, it's not a big deal. That makes sense. So there's that. I really do feel that social media is changing a lot of things and making it a little bit difficult to date because of, if we take TikTok, for example, a lot of those TikTok skits are hilarious. I laugh at them constantly, but they do tend to reinforce stereotypes and toxic behavior. And as you see, like, more young people like using some of these apps and seeing how some of those behaviors are, it becomes kind of an issue. Like, I can't grab one right now. I was gonna think of a scenario off the top of my head, but I don't want to butcher it. But there is a lot of those situations where it's kind of like, just reinforcing some of those more toxic stereotypes that really don't belong in a healthy partnerships, where communication is key and comprehension is just as important, right? So there's those. I think another challenge for when it comes to dating is like finding places to meet good people. I know now there's a lot of like great dating sites. I don't want to use great. I want to say there's a lot of dating sites because I know people have used them. I've used Tinder before and certain other applications, but I know that's a challenge for some people, especially if you're someone who prefers that in-person connection, right? You go somewhere, you meet somebody, if you click, great. If you don't, then you try another opportunity. Like me personally, I like to meet people in Target. You know what I mean? I feel like some of those conversations are really a little bit more robust than if I meet somebody at the end of the night at a club. We're both intoxicated and we don't remember what the conversation was, but we click based on like physical appearance, right? So those are a couple of the challenges, I think.
No, that makes sense. And I agree. There's a lot of challenges with dating today. And I definitely agree that social media plays a huge influence on that. Because even myself, like, scrolling on Instagram and stuff, and you just see so many of these, for me as a woman, definitely, independence is important to me, just to be able to take care of myself. But what I've noticed is that there's just a lot of this debate on finances, whether it be, women feeling like men should provide, and then, men feeling like you said, like, well, if I'm going to provide, then you should be in the kitchen type of situation. So I just feel like everybody, at the end of the day, we all have our preferences, but I definitely feel like social media, has really influenced the dating scene, but not in a great way.
Exactly. And I feel that I definitely have to clarify that I don't think women belong in the kitchen. I definitely don't think that. But that was more like when it comes to 50-50, because I can use some work in the kitchen. So it's all about that balance. But also I feel that social media definitely has, like, when they talk about the ideal person to date, right? One of the challenges I think, like, for men dating, it can be like, when you see a lot of these posts, it's about, I want a guy who's 6 feet tall with a beard and might have tattoos and a career and his own house and apartment, a car and all these. And a woman needs to have, multiple degrees and, her career on point, her own finances, a flat stomach, limited makeup, just all those kind of things that, the media constantly projects, especially when it comes to body imagery and things like that. That I feel like that can definitely be a challenge, because I know, because I met a lot of the young men I mentor, like, oh man, I don't look like a lot of these guys. I don't think I'll ever find a woman. I'm like, are you funny? And they're like, yeah, I have them dying in the classroom. Use that. Like, use that. There will be women who will find you funny. And it's always a great story when I hear them, like, down the line saying, hey, I got my first date and it went great and things like that. I was nervous. My hands are sweaty. I'm like, hey, how'd you get it? I was just myself and I was funny. So, I feel like social media rushes a lot of things and puts a lot of pressure on people. And a lot of times that people are just trying to connect with somebody who's just genuine. Because a lot of times, in this metaverse of ours, a lot of things aren't genuine. It's fictional. So they project what they want to. So I feel like that's some of the challenges that come into dating as well. Because I've been catfished a couple of times myself. So
I would agree. And I feel like when you mentioned about pressure, I just feel like for men and women, there's pressure. I feel like especially as we get older with dating, it's like, oh, I feel like for me, what I've noticed is a lot of, this idea of time and not wasting your time, or, after this amount of time, if that man hasn't, proposed or asked you to be his girlfriend or whatever, then it's like, you're not supposed to keep going and stuff. And I feel like stuff like that, I mean, granted, to an extent, yeah, it could be useful, but I also feel like too much pressure is not good. We are supposed to just let things kind of flow naturally, and like you said, get to know people, like really get to know. I feel like that's something that we just don't do. Like, we don't actually get to know people fully before committing, or just, putting a label on things and stuff. So I think that, dating is tough nowadays, for sure.
Oh, definitely. And I think that, like, when it comes to like the labels and things like that, I think for me, because when I was thinking about like what's something else to give advice about dating, I think one of the biggest things would be like to build a friendship and just genuinely get to know the person. I feel like, so a lot of times it is kind of, you want to rush into certain things, because I understand that, some women feel like because of society, might feel like and family feel rushed to be married before like 30, right? Or have children before a certain age. And I understand a lot of that, connects with like, biological clock and things like that, but it is always like a little heartbreaking to just when I hear a lot of my, female friends kind of just talk about, hey, my family's pressuring me to, have a kid by now, or be married by now, or at least have a stable man. And it's like, my priority right now isn't that, it's to build up my career. But I understand that, I need to have this before 35 and things like that. I feel like for a man, or at least from I statement, me personally, I never have felt that rush to have kids and be married. Personally, I want to have like 6 kids by 24 years old.
Oh, wow.
Right? I'm in my 30s now. I don't have 1 kid, and I'm so glad that didn't end up happening. But I've never actually felt, and when I tell people, they laugh just like that. Like, I've never had that pressure, like, hey, you need all these kids, you need to, be at a certain space. I feel like, when it comes to age, it might be, the guy should be at a certain place in his career, but dating wise, it kind of has always felt that men just have the floor to date, more or less as long as they want.
Right.
Which is always a challenge. So I always tell people, like, hey, if you can, try to build a friendship first, or build some type of, some roots at first. You know what I mean? Granted, and that's part of like the talking stage, but like I said earlier, the talking and dating stages, those can kind of get blended together. So the timing is kind of a challenge. Sometimes, like, hey, there's people might think that, you should be in a relationship after, a certain amount of months. I'll ask you, like, how many months do you think that someone should be dating or talking before being in a relationship?
Yeah, that was my next question. Cause like, for me, it's tough, because I've definitely been in a space where I think, okay, so I've been single for a few years now. And before that, I was in a relationship. And in that relationship, I felt that I did kind of have those pressures of like, oh, I should be, in a relationship and have kids and get married and stuff. So I felt that back then. I was like, after 3 months of talking, I was like, okay, well, what are we doing here? And we ended up getting into the relationship. But like, after experiencing that relationship, and obviously everyone is different, but after experiencing that, I realized that I prefer to take things a little bit slower as far as before jumping into an actual relationship, and really giving myself time, like you said, to really get to know someone and create a friendship and create like an actual foundation, like really get to know them and really see, like, is this someone that I really could, be long-term with, or, because people change, and as time goes on, you start to really see people in their element, and you get to really get to know them. And sometimes that desire to be with them changes. So now in dating, it's tough, because I can't say that I'm necessarily like forcing a relationship, but I'm open to a relationship right now. But I definitely feel like I don't put pressure on creating a label as much as I did before, whether it be on that person or myself, because I don't know, I guess partly it's, not, I like the freedom that I have as being single, but I also feel like for me to be in a relationship again with someone, that person really has to like, I don't know, I don't want to be like that cliche and be like they have to be special, but it has to be something that I really feel like this person, like I need to be with them, or not like that, but like I feel like, okay, there's no reason for me to want to be dating other people. This is the person that I want to really grow with and settle down with. So now I feel like when it comes to dating, I just kind of let things flow, and happen naturally, not necessarily having a timeline.
Oh, that definitely resonates with me, because I too, that's similar to what I'm doing now. Previously, I feel like I'm glad you said the 3 months. I feel like that's everybody's kind of cushion. If it doesn't work within 3 months, like they're either, start something new, or it's like, hey, so what are we doing? Maybe it's the number 3, or like that 3 months, because personally, whenever I'm in a relationship, I know it's going to work if it makes it past 3 months a lot of times. So, but personally, I'd like to wait. I don't put a timeline on it necessarily. I kind of like to go with the flow sometimes, but my cutoff is always about like 5 or 6 months. If by the 5th month, that might not even be a little bit too long, honestly, because typically I would know, a guy kind of knows, who he wants to be with. And a lot of times in my experience, I've kind of allowed the person I'm talking to kind of like, not necessarily dictate, but like if she's on a timeline, I kind of go based off of her. Like, for example, if we're talking for a few months and I can see that she wants to make this a little bit more serious, or to be serious at all, then I know to take this relationship a little bit more seriously, if you know what I mean. So a lot of times I won't even engage in a conversation unless I know that this might be fruitful, because I don't really want to waste my time these days. I used to love doing that. Let's just go with the flow. Let's date and talk to multiple people at once. I have a really bad personality memory, so it's like I'm forgetting if I'm talking to 10 people at once, things like that, dating wise. So so these days I just prefer to like give somebody my full attention, because if you're talking to multiple people, what's my biggest fear is, forgetting what they said and be like, oh, remember that you went hiking over the weekend, and it was completely somebody different. So I definitely don't want to run into any of that anymore. Anyways, but these days I date for intention. So a lot of times I like, you know what, if we can make it, near 6 months, then I feel like this is fruitful. I can, bring you around, maybe like my family, friends, things like that. Well, family takes a little bit longer, maybe like a year plus, but friends like around, 6 month mark, maybe niece and nephew, things like that. But yeah, no, that makes sense. And like you said,
as we get older, like I definitely feel like we should be moving with intention.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like for me, if like for myself, I have goals, I have, a vision for myself. So, finding that person that fits into that is important. And so having some form of intention is definitely good, because like you said, you don't want to waste your time either with someone who's just not aligned with what you're looking for. So exactly. Yeah, I feel like as long as you keep in your head and do what works for you, then that's, the most important part, as long as you, look out for yourself. And but like you said, the whole talking to multiple people thing, like that kind of gets old too. And like you said, I feel like for me, if you're talking to multiple people, you're not really getting to know them, because like you said, it's hard to keep up with, what this person did and that, what kind of conversations you had with them. So when you focus on one person and really take the time to get to know them, then you can actually grow something that can be, meaningful for you. So I wish that more people would do that. I feel like kind of like what we're saying, like society kind of does enforce this idea of like dating multiple people. It's because I see it on social media, even for women, like, don't put all your eggs in one basket, don't focus on one guy, like date around and stuff. And I think that that's smart to an extent, definitely. But once you find someone that, you know, you really gel with, why not, you know, give that a chance too?
Exactly. I mean, it's okay to like obviously keep your options open, like especially in the earlier stage if there's nothing, you know, if you didn't agree on, you know, what you're doing and you're just going with the flow and talking. But you know, but as things become progress and get a little bit more serious, I feel like, you know, it's important to like deal with intention, especially nowadays. I'm living more into it and understanding more when it comes to like soul ties, when it comes to like sexual intercourse and things like that. You know, previously when I heard about it, you know, you just kind of hear about it along with like energy chakra and sage and crystals and those kind of things. If you're someone who doesn't really practice those things and don't really pay attention to them. But when I had like kind of some examples of, you know, I was like thinking like, oh my goodness, this might actually be true. And this energy transfer of energy, it can actually be true, and you can feel it. Now I'm not an expert on it, so I'm not the person to speak on it, but I do feel like to an extent, at least the baseline, you should just be, as you get older, be just more conscious of who you're, you know, having intercourse with, or just giving your time in general too, because it can really affect you mentally, especially if you're dealing with somebody who might be a little bit more, might not communicate well. So you might really be feeling this person, but the communication skills are really bad, and it's influencing your mental health. And, you know, maybe you're stuck in a situationship that, you know, was supposed to only be 1 month, and then now it's like 5 years and stuff like that. We can talk about, you know, situationships and the issues with those, but definitely I feel like it's important to kind of like, you know, focus on, you know, that person that you actually want to give your energy to, and see where it goes from there. And if that doesn't work, then hopefully you can become friends. One of the challenges I have is when I am talking to somebody or dating somebody and it doesn't work out, I like to remain friends with them, because, you know, maybe we built a bond or a connection, or, you know, they're a great networking opportunity, and, you know, we vibe, and we didn't make it romantically. But the next person you talk to might not love that scenario, and want you like, you know, cut off everybody that you talked to previously. But so that's something I'm kind of challenging, dealing with a little bit. You know, that balance of, you know, I want to respect your wishes, but at the same time, this is a strong network that I've built right here, and I want to make sure that I don't just, you know, throw it away for something that might not last anyways. You know what I mean? Right.
No, that makes sense. And what I was gonna say, well, you mentioned about, you know, talking versus dating versus relationship, and I feel like it's tricky, because I feel like certain people have different ideas of what it is, and that can make things tough. So I guess what I want to ask you is what do you think are the differences between, you know, talking, dating, or being in a relationship?
Okay. The relationship part is the easier one, so I'll start there. Relationship, you know, you're in a committed relationship to that one person only. You know, that's the one who's getting the good morning and text and the good night text. You know, that's the one who's meeting your family, depending on where you are in that relationship. And, you know, that's the person, that's your go-to person. You know what I mean? That should be, I have had some, you know, back and forth feedback with this next part, but I feel like, you know, your partner should kind of like maybe be your best friend. You know what I mean? I have male best friends and I have female best friends. So, you know, that person, your partner, could just be in a different space as a best friend. But for me personally, I want to be able to always rely on that person in one way or another, because that's, you know, the person I'm deciding to spend, you know, my majority of my time with. So it's how I kind of feel about relationships. Obviously, it gets a little trickier, a little bit different as you know, progress, and you're thinking like you've been in a relationship with somebody for 10 years and things like that. So it's more so like becomes kind of a marriage, but baselines I kind of feel about relationships. The dating stage, that one gets a little tricky just because it's, are we dating, you know, inclusive, like if it's just me, exclusively me and that one person, or it's like you're kind of just dating around, which is why I don't really like the talking stage, because some people might say like in the talking stage, you can talk to multiple people and there's no commitment. So that's where it's kind of tricky. So it's for me, when I'm in the dating stage of the relationship, I kind of just like to, you know, put everything on the table. I like you. I'm only going on dates with you. I'm only giving you kind of my time. We're not committed yet, but I'm investing my time with you and going on these dates with you as a person, right? You know, some people might, you know, see dating as just, you know, you're still open. You're not in any commitment, so you're able to kind of like, you know, still shop around and things like that. But I feel like the only issue there is if it's not communicated, right? Because in a relationship, nobody belongs to you. So, you know what I'm saying? But we at least have a verbal contract that says, all right, I'm only going to talk and date you at this time. But with dating, it gets a little tricky when some people might say, hey, we're not in a committed relationship, so that's why I went on a date with somebody else, or I kissed so-and-so, or whatever the case may be with that. I feel like it's important, especially as adults, to kind of just like put everything on the table, let them know what it is, so there's no confusion, which I find that, a lot of men in my circle that I know personally, or even on social media, are quick to call women crazy, right? And I'm like, well, did you tell her what it is? Like, did you put everything on the table, or did you assume things, and then when she found out, then she reacted in a negative way, which caused you to call her crazy? So typically it's the second one, where they didn't communicate anything, and they just kind of like triggered the woman, especially if it's somebody who has a history of trauma. That could be challenging in that case. So when it comes to the talking stage, I feel like that's up in the air. That's DMs or direct messages, that's texting here and there. No real commitment. You don't need to send a text every day. If it's dating exclusively, I say a text a day, you know what I mean? Or at least a couple texts within the week. But if it's just talking, no commitment, you can, personally, I would, depending on who it is, send a text every 4 days or something, depending. I don't really clock it like that, honestly. It's with the flow. I feel like reaching out to the person, but I feel like, there's no real commitment in there. You're open to talk to whomever you want and things like that. Sometimes I like to make it, like to be upfront and say, hey, listen, I like you, I'm really just trying to get to know you. And this is where we are in this moment. I am talking to other people. So if it's on the table, they know, all right, great. He's talking to other people. Even if she's not talking to anyone, at least I give the opportunity to exit. Because I feel like that's a issue that a lot of people have, especially someone who's might be a chronic liar or cheaters and things like that. Just give the person the opportunity to say, hey, listen, this is how I'm feeling. This is where I'm at currently in the world. You can accept it or not. And if they're willing to accept it, then great, you can move forward. But not giving that opportunity to exit stage left if they want to I feel like it's a big issue.
Yeah, completely. I agree. First of all, I think that that's great that you operate that way, because it's definitely appreciated, because you come across, at least in my experience, people who aren't willing to do that versus people who are. And I feel like, I think that when someone's doing that, which is like you said, not communicating fully what their intentions are, what they're doing, I feel like that's just coming from slightly being selfish and wanting your cake and to eat it. You know what I mean? Just being able to basically lead that person on to think that it's something that it isn't. And that seems to be an issue with dating nowadays, which is definitely not great. But I think that, like what you said, whether it be man or female, just being able to be honest and saying, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing, and then giving that person the option to stay with it, or they can go on and find something that they feel is more matching to what they're looking for. I feel like if people operated that way more with dating, then it wouldn't be as complicated as it is right now.
Exactly.
Because I just think that people are moving with the intention of this is what I want, and I'm gonna, manipulate things in a way to get what I want without having to be completely honest, which sucks, but yeah, dating is supposed to be fun, and
yes,
I think that nowadays it's not always fun, just because, especially when, to kind of backtrack, like what you were saying about just being honest and putting things on the table. I think that, at least in my experience, or people that I've talked to, like friends and stuff, who they feel like the guy might be really acting in a way that kind of just gives this idea of wanting to be in a relationship, but then, like you said, pulling the, oh, you're being crazy type of thing, when the woman discovers something that makes them upset because they were thinking that it was going a certain way. So definitely think that communication is key, and you have to communicate in a way where you're okay with, hey, you know what, if you like that person, but you're not ready to commit, or you're not ready to just date them exclusively, you still have to communicate with them in a way where they can make that decision, and you have to be okay with, hey, that person might say, forget it, I don't want to keep doing this. And I think that could be an issue too, where people just don't want to give that person up, you know, in that sense of like, if I tell them the truth, then they might actually not want to be bothered anymore. Which is selfish, but
I feel like that's their comfort zone a lot of times. It's like, you know what, they know what this person has to offer, so they're gonna try to, you know, be 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and kind of, you know, just kind of string them along. Sometimes it's a situation where they string them along until somebody better comes along, or it's because the other person on the side is just allowing it, and they might not, you know, even recognize it sometimes. For me personally, there's been times where I didn't recognize that maybe my behavior isn't it's parallel to how the person was reacting towards me. If I'm not communicating effectively and the person's not saying anything, but they're holding all that inside, and I think I'm this great boyfriend and they're not saying anything to me, then is that my fault or is that their fault for not communicating and speaking up about that, right? But I also take into account, all right, well, who is their ex? I've dated a good amount of women who have been in abusive relationships where the guy would either they'll speak up about it, and the guy would either, you know, physically harm them, verbally harm them, or just kind of like dismiss them and nothing changes. So it's like, if I keep saying this, why speak up? But I feel like, you know, it's important to do some of that self-healing yourself so that you don't bring it into the next relationship, because a lot of time, because there is some guys who are willing to work with you and be patient, and vice versa. I'm not using it could work in either way, right. But there is some but personally there are some guys who are willing to work with you, and you know, and the bad quote unquote baggage that comes along with, you know, dating somebody who's come from trauma, but you have to be willing to like work with him as well, and like, you know, just open up a little bit, little by little, and share like, hey, actually this is one of my triggers and you're currently doing it, so let's work around that. Obviously communicating that a little bit better, but me personally, like, doing the active work to know, like, you know what, I generally wasn't taking advice from the best people, and so it made me not the best guy. So then actually, you know, sitting and listening to somebody on the other end saying, you know, this is some of my needs, and I feel like you're not fulfilling them. But it's also about how you're communicating to me. If you say like, hey, you're not doing, my ex used to do this and he was so great, you doing this, and you bring up your ex, now you're kind of like demeaning me in a way. Right. Not kind of, you are. Right. And you know, but by reflecting on your ex, like, all right, great, then go back to your ex. Now it becomes an argument rather than a regular conversation saying, hey, listen, honestly, something I would love in the future is that, you know, you just communicate a little bit better through text messages and things like that. Because even with text messages, we talk about social media, but even text messages have made dating more difficult, because, you know, you don't always know, you might perceive you might reply to somebody just the letter K, like, right, like, I'm on my way, you say K. Now, what is K supposed to mean? Are you upset with me? Are you mad? Right. But no, I'm driving. I see them send a quick K to acknowledge the fact that, you know, we're moving, you know. So that's one of the issues with even text messaging and trying to get to know somebody specifically through text, because you don't know their temperament through text. You can't read through any lines as much, or you might try to read through lines and then, you know, now you're assuming things that aren't even reality, and then someone on the other line might be telling like, oh my goodness, this person's crazy for assuming. But, you know, it's just about effective communication and knowing the person that you're dating. A little bit more difficult in the talking stage because it's so new and early, and some people do have, like, are very strict and will cut you off like at the side of one issue, one red flag. I'm not really like when the whole, like, you know, craze about red flags came about, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's too many of these red flags everywhere. But it's important to catch those red flags, right? And those things that might trigger you in the future, not always like, well, this person has great promise, so I'm gonna give them a chance, but they literally are already, you know, talking down to you in the first, like, or the big one, like, you know, you're talking to somebody, trying to really get to know them for intentional dating, and then they immediately go to talk about like sexual things, like in the first day. That's a red flag that you should probably see that maybe they only want one thing, you know what I mean? Right. But yeah. No,
that makes sense. And then you mentioned like situationships as well, which seems to be like a I don't want to say a trend, but it's definitely something that has become somewhat of a norm within dating. And I've heard stories of people just, being in situationships for years. And I mean, me personally, I feel like it's definitely a dangerous place to be in. It's different if both parties are okay with it because they feel like where they are in life, they just don't want, that relationship, that commitment, and it works for them. But I always feel like in situations like that, it's usually one person is not actually enjoying it, or that's not what they really want. I guess what's your take on situationships? Like, have you experienced that? Or, what are your ideas on that?
Personally, I've experienced that a few times in my life. Mm-hmm. And, I definitely hear you when you say that, most of the time it's not a mutual experience. A lot of times there is somebody on the other end that thinks or is very hopeful that, hey, one day this other person will come around and will have the ideal family, which can sometimes lead to that person being in a situation and not feeling good about themselves or the relationship, and they're stuck in that for like years on years. You know what I mean? So, me personally, I think that if it works for you and your partner, and it's on the table, and it's like, I don't want anything serious right now. I know that you don't want it. Maybe I know a friend. They ended up being in a situationship because the guy was just working full time, and his girlfriend was in school full time going for her master's degree. So she didn't really have time to be in a committed relationship with him because he was getting a little frustrated that she had to spend so much time academically, like with her schoolwork and everything like that. And he thought that she was going behind his back, cheating, things like that, when it was little that she was just focusing on like her projects and her work. So they, as a team, decide like, hey, we're not best fit right now, but I still want to be committed to you. I just don't want the title or the expectations to have to constantly like reach out and things like that. Is that all right? So it worked for them, and eventually they got married. So what I mean, they kind of took that break. Typically, when we're thinking breaks, I've always said as an adult, like when people say breaks, I'm like, that's kind of like high school stuff. Like, you want to break right now, and then to like go experience and then come back to me. It's like, if you want to be with me, let's work it out together. I haven't really delved into the couples therapy realm yet, but I know many friends that's worked for. But honestly, I think that after a certain time frame, I think it's important to kind of like understand where you, especially if you're the one who's not feeling great about the situationship, is to kind of like, all right, asking the guy, so what do you want to do? Like, what are we doing? Like, and just putting that on the table. If he gets upset about it, let him be upset, because you need some of those like hard conversations, those difficult conversations. Otherwise, you'll be stuck in that situationship for another couple of months until you feel enough courage to get into that, have that conversation again, and vice versa. I know men who have been in a situation as well, who have been, they've been dating the woman of their dreams and stuff like that, and they really wanted to be with them, but the woman wasn't ready for a committed relationship anymore, and kind of wanted to still, do certain things, like mainly like sexual acts with the person, but also like just date around to make sure to see if quote unquote she still has it. Meaning still has it, meaning she's still able to flirt with other guys, go on dates, but she's not going to go any further than that. So, which I can understand, especially as you get older. Maybe you were with somebody, throughout high school and throughout, maybe you were with somebody for like 6 years, and now you're single, so you want to just shop around a little bit. Right. So you still got it. But the issues that can arise on the guy side, he's like, all right, well, she said that she's just not, he might feel a little bit inferior a little bit. He felt that, she's out just going on dates and not doing anything more, but at the same time, in the back of his mind, he's stressing himself out, like, oh my God, I wonder if she's doing this or doing that behind my back. I don't know if I can fully trust her, things like that. So that's like, there's just so many, like, there's all little nuances when it comes to situationships, but I feel like that in the end, it's rare for me to see like a healthy situationship, because it's kind of like, all right, so what's the barrier that's keeping you from being together, right? With a lot of guys, sometimes it's like, hey, I'm not ready. I want to go talk to other girls and mess around and not be, held accountable for my actions. Like, hey, yes, I was with another woman, but you're not my girlfriend, so what can you really say? Something like that. But they want to still keep her around because maybe he's dependent on her. She does his taxes, or, you know, uses her car, things like that, and vice versa, you know? So a lot of times I just kind of, when I found myself being in constant situations just personally, it was just because I didn't always want to like lose that connection I had with that person. I didn't want them to move on. So it's like, all right, well, I can't be with you right now because I'll just use a specific situation. I was dating somebody and their parents were very verbally abusive to them. So it trickled down to them trying to be verbally abusive to me. So I found that, you know, hey, I was patient because I understood the trauma. And, you know, I did that work to know, all right, this isn't necessarily your fault. It's what you were raised to think is a norm, but that's not normal for me. I'm gonna need you to find ways to like cut that, but not saying it that way, because you have to be, if you care about the person, you have to be understanding to their trauma and kind of like have that communication, like, hey, this is how, when you scream at me for no reason, this is how it makes me feel. But also even me saying the no reason part, right? That's a microaggression. Me saying I'm not, I'm kind of like diminishing your feelings because clearly you felt a reason to scream at me for this particular case. I might feel like it's really nothing, like, hey, sorry, I ate your mango. Like, did you really have to like cuss me out for this mango? But maybe all day you were hoping for that mango, and I didn't communicate that I'm gonna eat your mango. And, you know, maybe it was, you know, certain things like that, just really all about communicating. But in a situationship, honestly, like a lot of times it is the other person like hoping that this can be resolved in one way or another, and willing to stick out through all the red flags during that. But hey, honestly, I don't think they tend not to work as much in my experience.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. It's definitely a risky thing to be a part of. And what else? I was thinking of another thing. So I don't know if I asked you this already, but who do you think has it harder with dating today, men or women?
This question. Okay, so I was actually thinking this one over, and I would say women. And honestly, for the most part, I think to an extent, it might, I don't want to say, I'm not someone who doesn't live into always. I really don't love saying always, but I feel like it might always be the woman, like it might be harder for women, you know what I mean? Because of all of the expectations women have from women in their circle, whether that's friends, it could be family, aunts, mothers, grandmothers, all those expectations when it comes to dating. Then it's the societal norms around dating that women have to like kind of live up to in some cases. And then it's just kind of like, you know, and then it's men and this urge, not every man, but urge for them to, you know, want a woman who's submissive, right? Which can look a lot different in different ways, but I feel that sometimes, you know, some women don't like, a lot in my experience, a lot of women will always say like, I'll submit to a man when he shows me he can lead, right? Which I understand completely, and which makes a lot of sense. But me personally, I'm not looking for anybody to submit to me. Like, you know, right. I'm not looking for that. I just look for a partner. Like, you know what I mean? Right. The only time that I understand the submissive part would be, you know, bedroom, okay, that woman, or, you know, if the person's like just has a really dominant personality, and like when it comes to their career or just like, you know, education, things like that. But you know, kind of like not like simmer it down a little bit. Like if you're just, and when I say simmer it down, I mean like, you know, if we're about to have dinner and we're talking about, okay, I want pasta, you want rice, and then you want to like say, hey, this is why we need rice. We're not gonna have, like, you know, just an aggressive manner like that. I'm like, all right, we don't need to be aggressive here. I'll eat whatever you want to eat. I just kind of want pasta. You want rice? Maybe we can get an Uber Eats and split it and, you know, do something. That's the kind of guy I am. This is compromise. But what's the only reason why I say like the submit part? I'm like, okay, well, you know, we don't need to be aggressive about this. But then that's the case of like, is it submission, or is it just you don't want somebody who's aggressive, or the quote unquote when it comes to like Black women and the issue that men are constantly that constant debate of I listened to like a really terrible podcast where these guys were like really trying to you know, talk badly about dark-skinned women. I'm not sure if you heard that podcast. I
heard about that one, yeah.
Yeah, like you know, but I cut that one off. But I listened to Joe Budden when he was kind of like explaining like, you know, what they were trying to come to or whatever like that. But they had no point. They were just trying to like degrade Black women. Right. But that's one of the things. You know, the stereotypes around Black women, or specifically in their case, like dark-skinned women, and how they're more aggressive or and things like that. Mm-hmm. And me being a dark-skinned Black man, navigating, you know, through like a professional, predominantly white landscape, and like understanding like, hey, sometimes I might come across as the angry black man for no reason when I'm like literally like doing nothing. Like it really like irks my soul when people like do that, put like black women into that category, because it's not even, I'm trying to connect it to being submissive, and it's not. No, it's just people having bad, being racist. Let's just be real. You know what I mean? And stereotyping for negative ways. But sorry, I went on kind of a tangent. So the harder part. I definitely feel like it's harder for women just because of some of those things I've just named, and trying not to, if they're too assertive, or even if they reach for the check, maybe they're being seen as differently, and they shouldn't do that, and I always feel like it's kind of like dimming their light for a man, like why, or anybody. If we're talking about same-sex relationships, any of these things can connect to same-sex relationships. Like the whole thing around like dimming their light, I'm like, why? If there's somebody who's really good at planning, like let's use dates for example. If you're somebody who's, I love planning dates because I love any excuse to like visit something new and try something new a lot of times. And dating's a great opportunity to like try new food, which is the best part. New food, new drinks. So if the other person on the other side that I'm dating like loves planning and knows a lot of great date ideas, I'm not going to say, you know what, shelve those ideas, don't talk to me about them, because I have a vision for how we're going to be dating, and I'm going to plan everything, and that's that. And society might be okay with that, or might say, a woman who's trying to help plan dates might be too assertive and might be trying to be the man, quote unquote, the man in a relationship. I'm like, we're just dating, having a good time. Like you said, it's supposed to be enjoyable. And besides, the biggest part is you want to make sure your partner is happy, right? So if your partner says, hey, I prefer, like for example, like I've dated women who've loved, going to Mexican restaurants, right? Having quesadillas, a lot of things that involve cheese. I'm lactose intolerant. I don't want to do that. So if I don't have the person's input, or vice versa, if the person's lactose intolerant and I invite them to like this Mexican's or to go get ice cream, not even caring to know whether their medical history or any of that stuff, or even if they like ice cream in general, that could be an issue. Like I tried to bring somebody to Pinkberry one time. Have you been to Pinkberry?
No, I've never been.
So Pinkberry is a frozen yogurt spot. It got a little trendy or viral at one point or whatever. So I'm like, you know what? I'll try it out with somebody. And the person like hated frozen yogurt, and I hated it as well. So you know what I mean? So it's about just trying and experiencing different things and really knowing the other person on the side. But to answer your point, I definitely think it's hard for women sometimes because they have to, when dealing with certain men. Oh, and the safety part. I didn't even get to talk about the safety when it comes into that. That's probably the biggest piece with that. Like, knowing that you have to keep yourself safe at all times, especially if it's like blind dates or first time dates, whether that's meeting the person in person or online. There's constantly, there was a case recently, one of the, a pageant winner was found in her, like in the hotel with like a guy she like just met. She was in her 20s, he was in his 30s. I feel so bad about not remembering her name. I'm sure you probably have seen it. But she was found deceased, and the cops came and they didn't even prosecute him or anything, or like put cuffs on him, and he was like, oh, he sounded like a stand-up guy. Black woman, he's a white man, right? Yeah. And and now her family had to like really fight for her. So it's like, what? All the clues are here. Is it because she's young? Is it because she's a black woman? Is it because they met online? Like, what is it exactly? Or seeing cases where a while back there was a case where there was an unconscious this swimmer raped this unconscious woman, and he got no jail time because it would have affected his future. Things like that. So a lot of times, like women just need to be take more care. Like just be aware and careful. Walk around with pepper spray. I don't know. I'm not looking to get pepper spray. That's why I make sure that the woman knows I'm not one of these kind of guys. So, but safety is definitely important. And for guys too, that safety is important. I do know a couple of guys who have been like set up. They're scheduled a date. The woman set them up. They end up getting robbed. Things like that. So it's really about keeping safe and. But I feel like it's a little bit easier for men to keep themselves safe than it is for women. I think those are some of the barriers.
No, I definitely agree. And I was going to say that, like, I've heard of stories of guys getting set up too. So as much as online dating is, easier, it's definitely, you have to be careful. Like you said, both sides, men and women, just being careful because you never know who that person is, and what their intentions are and stuff. So just being open, but still being safety is the number one thing. And what advice would you give to a man and a woman dating today that they're looking for love? What advice would you give?
The first I would definitely always say is like learn that person's love language. Mm-hmm. I know that's that's kind of a trigger word, but I feel that it's very important to know what the person you're dating, who the person, like what their likes are, the person on the side, like who are they as a person. There might be some guys who think that just buying a woman a few Teflon bags and Fendi bags and she's good, but then there's the women who just want a hug and don't want all this materialistic stuff, but the guy's not taking enough time to find out her love language, and vice versa. Maybe a guy a lot of times he gives you his full attention 6 times out the week, and on Sunday he just wants to be with his boys and watch football. But now you're trying to, maybe the woman's trying to be a part of that experience, but he's kind of constantly like pushing her out, but she's not getting the hints or whatever like that. Right now that's building a little bit of a bridge between them, because you're not learning your man's love language, and this is time to be in his man cave with his boys. Is a long time. He'll give you the rest of the 6 days of the week, just give him the 7, right? So I think that's very important to know that person's language. Communication is key. I think like we spoke about that a lot, like making sure that you communicate with your partner, and and not taking it personally. Like if your partner says, "Hey, where are you?" Not necessarily completely think like, "Oh, they're clocking me." Mm-hmm. There's some partners that do that. Let's be honest. But maybe the person needs to know that you're safe and where you are, and making sure like, "Hey, do you want me to Uber eat you any food right now?" Or, "Oh, maybe I'm close by. Maybe we can meet up," and something like that. I mean, it's not always. I like to always say another point would be like think best intentions a lot of times. Mm-hmm. If you're with a partner, they're not your enemy, right? There's some people who are in full-blown relationships and they hate the person on the other side, right? So I think it's important to kind of like, figuring out like where the disconnect is. It's harder when there's like pre-existing like conditions. Like for example, if one of the people in that relationship cheated, so you might always be upset at that person because of that factor. But it's like, if you can't get over that and you didn't do the work to try to get over that, maybe it's therapy, maybe it's talking it through, maybe it's different types of things. But if you didn't do that work and you're constantly reminding that man or woman that they cheat on you, maybe it's time to like take a break, or maybe you'll figure out like this isn't for me, and to find someone else that is more compatible. But I definitely think that communication is important. I also think that building a friendship is definitely the foundation, because you tend not to want to do bad towards a person or your friend and somebody you care about. It's a little bit different like when it comes to dating, which is weird. I think that if you're dating somebody, you should care about them just as much as a friend, what I mean, especially if you're dating intentionally. But there is a disconnect, and there is many people who cheat on their partners and things like that. But I feel that if you built that friendship and that person's like your best friend or just a close friend like that, you're more likely not to want to harm them and do that. You're more likely to exit the relationship before wanting to like make your person feel look or feel stupid in any capacity when it comes to those kind of things. I think those are probably like the biggest things for me when I think about relationships. Compatibility is important too, but at the same time, as you know, opposites can attract, right? But in those cases, to strengthen that connection is where communication and comprehension comes in. Because for me personally, example, like I like sometimes I've dated people who are like have similar interests as me, like going to art galleries and museums and fashion shows and things like that. You know what I mean? But then like sometimes we do have, it might not always work out for a number of reasons. Maybe like there's not enough of a spark there. I'm like dating, I feel like I'm dating myself. So then I might go to somebody who's a little bit more on the wild side, parties a lot, because I typically don't date people like to party very often. So maybe they're giving me that excitement right on that side.
Right.
But at the same time, they're bringing me into different spaces that I might not always go to, things like that. But the issue might be communication, where it's like, all right, hey, we're having a good time. We might not agree on everything, but we have to have these baseline norms, where the baseline norm meaning respecting one another, communicating, and like, just thinking kind of best intentions. And like, if I'm out, like a lot of times when I'm dating with somebody, I make sure like to communicate, when I'm out, I'm representing you, and vice versa, right? It's representation. So some people might say, hey, they'll put me on that pedestal, and it's like, all right, cool. Then we have to take some steps back, and like maybe some titles need to be retracted and things like that. But at the same time, always like, I'm a reflection on you, because when I'm out, if I'm dating you exclusively and people see me like with somebody else, that might be a challenge, right? So actually, that brings me to one of the challenges I have, like when it comes to dating. It's specific one might be the dancing aspect, right? Are you Caribbean?
No. Well, okay. I guess kind of. I have Grenadian heritage on my dad's side, but yeah.
Okay, perfect. So when it comes to people with like the challenge I always have from dating like African American women to dating like Jamaican Americans or Haitian Americans, Trinidadian American women, it's a dating piece, right? Because as we all know, like a lot of part of our culture when it comes to like reggae music is grinding, right? Or daggering and all those other kind of things. So me, I've always said that, I'm not, if I'm dating somebody exclusively, like, and you're my partner, I don't feel comfortable with my partner, doing those acts, like, whether it's in front of me or when I'm not there. And one of the challenges I've had, dating Caribbean women, it's like, well, that's part of the culture. That's who I am as a person. You're trying to change me. And, and a lot of times, if you don't agree with somebody, they're like, you're trying to change you. And me personally, I always say that, these are my negotiables or my non-negotiables, right? I always like to put them on the table. I don't like it being in a relationship with a woman, with a woman, and she, is grinding on other men. I personally don't feel comfortable with that. So if someone on the other side is like, hey, that's part of my identity and you're changing me, I'm like, hey, well, I'm not in the business of changing people. If you can't accept that, cool, we could be great friends. You're a great human being. Goodbye. Let's cut ties respectfully. But that comes back to like, when it comes to dating, like, put your negotiables out there, right? Like what can you negotiate on and what can't you? If this person eating with their mouth open is driving you crazy, but they love eating with their mouth open, now it's time to negotiate. Can we live together long term or for all our lives with you eating with your mouth open? I cannot, personally. Those are just a few things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Definitely agree on the compatibility, the honesty, loyalty, and just respect, and communication. Like we said a lot throughout this episode, like communication is a really big thing that I think that people should pay attention to more, and like you said, not just communicating but also comprehending as well, because someone can tell you all day what they do and don't like, but if you're not understanding it or taking the time to like consider it and make some changes to respect, what their non-negotiables are, then it's kind of pointless, right? Having those talks and communicating what you like and don't like. So, I overall definitely feel like you dropped a lot of gems today, and I appreciate you, sharing your experiences and being willing to participate on the episode. Do you have any, last words that you want to say on this episode?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. I hope to continue the conversation because this is always going to be an ongoing one. I would just say, to lovers out there and people who are looking for love, I'd say like, never give up on it. It'll find you. Sometimes you have to kind of like do some of the work too, like relationships, especially as you get older, it's about a lot of it's about compromise, which I feel like we didn't talk too much about, but like, definitely compromising in areas that make sense for you and the person, right? So wish you all best of luck and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Meditate, manifest, invest in you. Join me on my spiritual journey as I elevate myself and like-minded listeners to a higher level, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for listening. This is Black Hippie Lounge, and I am your host, Chanel.